Ladies and... What was that? It's like you lose the ability to speak every time you start to record a video. Didn't hear anything? I felt it. Ladies and gentlemen, there's been a big topic going through the Street Fighter 6 community, and that is the idea of DLC power creep in Street Fighter 6. Have we experienced it? Is it going on right now? Well, I figured what we do today is actually take a look back at the history of the DLC characters thus far in Street Fighter 6's lifespan over the course of a year and some months now, and take a look and see if that's really truly the case, if it actually stacks up with the data for every DLC character that has been added to the game in chronological fashion, and their relative strengths and tournament results and usage rates in the community. The very first DLC character we had a couple months after release was, of course, Rashid. Rashid was released on July 24, 2023, and was actually tournament legal at EVO 11 days later. And I feel like it doesn't really take too much convincing on my part to say that Rashid is a very, very strong character. And I think as of right now, Season 2 in Street Fighter 6, I actually think he's the #1 character in the game. But with 11 days to go at EVO 2023, did anyone take him to the tournament? Did he dominate the tournament? Did he ruin EVO for everyone? Well, not exactly. If you look at the usage rates for EVO 2023, now granted, only 11 days later, only one Rashid cracked top 24, and there's actually only one in top 64 as well. It's the same player, which I believe was Momochi, using actually Rashid at the time. But in top 256, we see Rashid here towards the bottom, with 5 people using Rashid in top 256 of EVO 2023, the very first EVO for Street Fighter 6. But that's not to say he didn't ruin some people's EVOs, because there's mine right there. I was actually eliminated 11 days after the character released, last game, last round, by top level Japanese Rashid. He formerly played Rashid, played a lot of Cody, one of the best players out of Japan, John Takeuchi. He picked up Rashid in 11 days, and I lost last game, last round. He popped level 2, and I tried to interrupt it with JP's OD spikes, put myself in burnout, then I just watched myself lose for the next 30 seconds while I blocked, unable to counterattack. So, if you ask me, Rashid was broken out of the gate. Well, not exactly, but at this time, people actually didn't really consider Rashid to be that noteworthy. It actually took a lot of time to develop Rashid to become the beast that a lot of people know him as today, and that's not due to the fact that he was patched or buffed. It just took a little while for us to fully understand the Street Fighter 6 meta and fully understand how to utilize him. So out of the gate, he actually wasn't that relevant in the first couple months in terms of tournaments. Then, of course, things would quickly change with CPT Singapore, where Gachikun would go on to win that major event, and we saw plenty of Rashid representation from there on out. Next up was Aki, release date September 27th, a few months later. She was, I think, the most failure to launch DLC character of the bunch so far. I really enjoyed Aki when she released, but she definitely had some clearly defined weaknesses. She had good rush down, but she had really hard time dealing with a lot of fireballs, and just had a kind of a weak low game. And in the meta, the way it was with JP and Luke everywhere and Ken everywhere, she just really wasn't keeping up with the pack. And you know what? It kind of showed, because going into Capcom Cup, which was in February 16th, so, you know, Aki released kind of towards the end of the CPT season, the last quarter, I would say. So not many people had time to pick up Aki and take her to CPT events. And here, Cat Cammy, we're going to reference a lot of Cat Cammy's detailed breakdowns and statistics, so we'll link their stuff in the description. If you're interested in nerdy details about Street Fighter 6 usage rates and all kinds of interesting stats, Cat Cammy is the person to follow on Twitter. So here's a detailed breakdown of qualified characters for Capcom Cup X. So of all the top 8s, this is the character representation, split between qualified top 4 and top 8. So you can see, of course, Ken and Luke and JP up here, top of the bunch. And then there is Aki. At the very bottom here, Aki had 2 representatives in top 8s for these qualifying events. One being Broski, and I'm not exactly sure who the other one is. I apologize, I don't quite recall. But you can see by this point, Rashid was starting to have some representation, and even had a player in Capcom Cup qualified, which is Gachikun, who won CPT Singapore. But not only that, actually Dookie from, I believe, Argentina, please correct me. He actually played a pretty mean Rashid in Capcom Cup groups. So there was actually more than one Rashid by the time we actually got to the Capcom Cup. So Rashid took a while to develop, but definitely saw some significant tournament usage and success by the end of Season 1. After Capcom Cup, next up was Ed, released February 17th, 2024, after Capcom Cup concluded. We didn't get the balance patch yet, it was still Season 1 Ed. And Ed is another character that is sort of like Rashid. He wasn't initially seen as a very strong character, but had a lot of potential. He was very unorthodox. His flicker system was obviously very strong, but people weren't exactly sure where he would end up or how he would be utilized. And he was seen as kind of a higher skill ceiling character, which generally is not a good thing. In modern fighting games, you want characters to be easy and effective because other characters are easy and effective. So at first, it was kind of questionable where he would end up. Here you can see at EVO Japan, 2 months after Ed's release, and you can see here, at this point, there was a lot of promise with Ed because we saw Momochi doing a lot of work in Japan, and a lot of the Japanese players were gravitating towards this character, but we only had one representative in top 32 for EVO Japan, and then the rest of the usual suspects, including Rashid, climbing in the results, showing the DLC powerhouse he is. But Aki, nowhere to be found. But there was another revolution in Ed gameplay here, and that was, of course, the Dream Combo. This is June 11th, so a couple months later. This is Momochi demonstrating some major developments. Post Season 2 patch, where Ed received basically no changes, but the community found something instead. There it is. The Dream Combo. By using heavy blitz from Ed and a specific height and timing in conjunction with his level 2, you're able to pull the opponent out of the combo, which let you do ridiculous damage, ridiculous corner carry, ridiculous meter build, and he's able to get another level 2 in the same sequence and harass the burned out Ken player here and get the guaranteed chip to close out the round. So this was like an evolution in Ed, like a case of real emergent gameplay in the modern era, which is pretty rare. So in the Season 2 balance patch, since Ed released so close to the balance patch, he basically got nothing effectively. But the player base made up for it by discovering this combo, and there's a whole evolution in how to utilize Ed's level 2 with all these sort of decent combos, which often were based around using heavy blitz with you use OD blitz to start the combo, cancel the level 2, and pull them out of the level 2 to sandwich them between you and the orb there. And that really made the character actually much stronger. He was already getting stronger as players understood how to play his neutral and to control the pace of the match, but he was getting even more strong because of this evolution. But another evolution was coming. With the Season 2 balance patch, Akuma dropped on May 22nd. So yeah, Ed players are figuring out all these technical options, but Akuma shows up and it is clear. We are in a new era, a new season of DLC power, because with Rashid, people thought he was okay, but would take time to develop, and then he became really strong. Aki, people thought she was weird and she wasn't that good until Season 2 with Akuma. She got a lot of buffs, and I think she's really strong now with the release of Akuma. The Season 2 balance patch gave her a lot of tools. Ed also took time to develop, but when Akuma released, it was clear we had a top tier DLC, and there was no real debate. There was a general consensus in the community pretty much a day or two after it was released that this character was going to be a problem. And you know what? It started to show very quickly, because here we have DreamHack Summer, June 14th. This is just like a month after, less than a month after Akuma's release. We see 2 Akumas in the top 24, and this is part of the Esports World Cup at this time. Players are going to offline tournaments all around the world to qualify for the Esports World Cup, where they throw around hundreds of thousands of dollars with the players. So we had some of the most stacked international competition at these times. And you can see here, there's 2 Rashids, 3 Eds. The Eds are really coming into their own at this time. There's even an Aki in top 24 here. Aki remained not as popular of a pick, but started to see a lot more tournament success with players like Broski and even Hikaru out of Japan, who managed to go really far. Hikaru himself went really far at the Esports World Cup. We're starting to see the DLC show up as like the regular cast of characters in this game with the release of Akuma. One for just being out of the gate strong, another for having their buffs actually appropriately applied to them, and then 2 for just developing over time as the player base got stronger with their existing tools. And you can see here that even with those developments for characters like Ed and Rashid, it's nothing compared to Akuma, man. This is Akuma on, what is this, June 19th? 28 days later. So almost a month later, the Street Fighter 6 Legend character representation, 54 Akumas. 54 Akumas. Clearly, by far, the #1 most represented character in Legend rank. If you drop down for the next DLC character, there's Ed at 22, Aki at 20, and Rashid at 19. So Akuma is leading the pack here. And this is not the end-all be-all to figure out a character's strength, but you have to understand that Akuma is also a Shoto, so a lot of players who play other characters like Ken, Luke, Ryu, they can very easily pick up Akuma, and the general Street Fighter player base is very strong with Shoto type characters to begin with, so he's an easy character to pick up because they're familiar with the archetype. But that said, he's still very strong. You just can't assume he's the best character in the game because of this data, but yeah, no, it definitely is an indication that he is a popular pick and is going far in the online ranked system. So Akuma and the DLC characters are starting to have a lot more tournament success and a lot more representation. And then here comes the next DLC, M. Bison, released on June 26th. And you know what? When this character released, I knew he was good. I knew he was easy. I thought he was the easiest character I had used to get to master rank. I take all the DLC characters to master rank just to try him out. And I thought he was ridiculous. Now, I did not think he would be necessarily the best in the game or anything like that. I assumed due to the lack of defensive options, he would start to suffer once people understood his offensive patterns. And, you know, maybe we weren't used to the gimmicks yet. We weren't used to the head stomps, the scissors, spacing, and all that. Once the dust settles, I think he'd be strong, but not the best. Even in the face of things like this. This is like day one from Flawless Deku. Gets jump in with Cammy, DP punish, optimize here with the bomb on, and that's death. That is a legit 2-touch. The camera cuts away, but this combo absolutely kills. That's like a clean 80% combo from M. Bison. And this was not just like a rare training room scenario. Clips were going all over the place. The footage was out of this character just massacring people due to the bomb system plus his OD Psycho Crusher just absolutely melting life bars. And I thought, you know, even with all that, his damage is absurd, but people will learn to defend. And so I thought he would be good, but not top 5 maybe. I think I was wrong. I think M. Bison is a clear example, in my opinion, of a certain trend with the DLC characters coming out. And if we go to EVO 2024, which is 23 days after the release of M. Bison, we can see he had a lot of tournament success. Ed is the #1 represented DLC character, top 2 represented overall and top 32, and tied for the most in top 8. But here we also have M. Bison here. Nemo actually managed to take him all the way to top 6 and get on the big stage with M. Bison. And we saw a lot of M. Bison representation in the top 32. And Rashid, not as much. And interestingly enough, no Aki. No Aki this time. So Aki generally seen as like the weaker of the DLC bunch, but still very good. And also more of a character specialist type of character. But we see DLC characters definitely having a strong performance at EVO 2024. Next one up, this is the Legend ranking, also 28 days later. So EVO is 23 days, rather, after M. Bison's release. This is 28 days after M. Bison's release. And while Akuma is no longer the #1 most represented character in Legend rank, Cammy takes over the #1 spot. We have M. Bison there in 4th place, Ed here towards the top 4th here. Rashid in the middle of the pack, and Aki towards the tail end. And we also can't forget Rashid Grand Finals of EVO. We start seeing Rashid also win tournaments. Big Bird wins his DreamHack qualifier. Gachikun is performing extremely well at Esports World Cup. So we continue to see these characters do really well at these big tournaments, including, Esports World Cup. This is a little bit later, like half a month later after EVO concludes. And look at that, Akuma and M. Bison, the #1 and #2 most represented characters, with Rashid in 4th and Ed there in like what, 6th place or 7th place right there. So it is DLC Central. And what were the grand finals? It was Akuma versus M. Bison. Rashid was all over the place, with Gachikun going very far, Dual Kevin, Big Bird, and Oil King being eliminated early. Even Hikaru is in there with his Aki making top 8. So DLC galore. Ed is in there, of course. And even Modern Ed with Tachikawa having a really strong performance with his Modern Ed, eliminating Angry Bird in the process in top 8. So yeah, the characters are definitely strong, and they are tournament viable, and players are picking them up to compete at the highest level. Now comes Terry. Terry releasing on September 24th. He's been out for a bit of time at this point. So what do we expect Terry to perform like? Will the trend continue? Well, I opened up Twitter to see what the buzz is, and I was met with D tier. This is Nemo's latest tier list. He has a translation here. S, best character of the season. A, most people are in top 5 candidates. B, these could be top 5. C is a tough character. D is strong with weaknesses. E, characters who are annoying to play against. And there's Terry down in D tier with the likes of Manon and Honda. Wow, that is actually kind of shocking to hear, especially considering the general trend, right? Even in this list, DLC, 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 DLC to be the worst one so far. I would assume that Aki in season 1 would be down here as well. So she did need some patch buffs to improve her viability. But, you know, maybe that's just one man's opinion. Nemo, you know, a lot of people tend to disagree with his takes and opinions. People tend to imply that he's impression farming, even though I don't think he is. I just think the players in Japan have a very different view and experience of the game than players in the Western world. But maybe we can get the view of another top level player, maybe one who actually has put a lot of time into Terry. Here's Riddles. Tune into Mago's stream, and this is what I see. There's just no way, man. Mago has Terry in E tier. You thought D was bad. He's in E tier. Only Marissa down here with him. Worse than Honda, worse than Jamie. Mago has put the time in with Terry. He reached, I believe he peaked at rank number 1 Terry, or maybe rank number 2, but he's at the top of the leaderboards with Terry consistently. But that might color your bias in the other direction, where he's downplaying the character he's struggling with. But apparently Mago is very excited to use Terry in Street Fighter 6 and is very disappointed with his strength and competitive viability. So he is at the bottom in E tier, which is nuts to see. Like I said, given the trend of what I think is pretty viable DLC power creep. And here's another stat here from Cat Cami. This is the latest legend ranked data. Now, this is only 4 days after Terry's release, so it's not the same as what we saw in the other data samples, which were like 28 days later. 4 days after Terry's release, only like, what is this, 18 or 19 legend rank Terrys in the middle of the pack here. And Terry is sort of a Shoto-like character. He plays very similar to other Shoto characters, so you would expect to see a similar phenomena or response like you saw with Akuma, considering he's an easy to pick up and play character in some sense due to his general game plan. I think he's more complex in other ways than like a Ryu or Ken. But he has a low forward, he has a fireball, and he has a DP, right? There's a certain flow and a certain game plan that he shares in common with Shoto-like characters, even though he has his own unique flair. And I think he's a technical character. This is very early, so I'm sure this number has gone up, but it's actually, I would assume, maybe I'm wrong, but I would assume when we had 54 Akumas in Legend rank, by day 4 there would be a lot more of them in that rank, because it doesn't take that long. If you just win your matches for top level players, they get to the legend rank in 1 session or 2 sessions max. So 2 days is plenty of time to get to that rank, depending on the time of the season, right? So that's a really, really low ranking amount, I believe, for Terry out of the gate here. So what does that mean? Does that mean the era of DLC power creep is over? Was there DLC power creep to begin with? Well, I think, yeah, I do think there was a little bit of DLC power creep, and in my opinion, I feel it is in the developers and the community's best interest for DLC characters to be strong. That might be like controversial to say or think. There's always people who bemoan the fact that DLC is pay to win and that developers are purposely making DLC characters broken in order to push sales. And you know what? There's probably a financial incentive. I would definitely agree with that to a degree. There's a financial incentive to make DLC characters in fighting games strong, because if they come out and they're weak and they're not relevant and at all competitively, and they're not seen, they're not self-advertising. A strong character advertises itself, because you will see it used in community events and tournaments, and that will drive more sales for the character within the community. And also, if they're weak, there's no reason to even lab against them. There's no reason they become irrelevant characters. If Jamie was a DLC character right now, would anyone buy the character? Right? So I do believe there is an incentive there. But at the same time, I also think it's kind of a waste if a character comes out and they're so weak that nobody cares. They're a flash in the pan and they become irrelevant by the next week, right? So in my opinion, I think it's healthy for DLC characters to be at least strong. And it's a very difficult balancing act to actually balance characters. But it felt very clear that characters like Akuma and Bison Capcom was kind of cranking up some of the values on the knobs. They were really pushing it. M. Bison being the way he is almost egregious to me. Like I'm shocked that in the mini balance patch with Terry's release, they didn't tweak any of his scaling or any of his values. So it's really hard for me to say what their vision is, because Terry definitely feels relatively tame and balanced compared to the rest of the cast. He feels a lot more like a Rashid or Ed. Now, Rashid and Ed became top tier characters after a lot of development. There is potential for Terry, but saying there's potential for a character is always kind of a cursed sign. 9 times out of 10, that means they end up falling off rather than rising to that potential. So Terry, I feel like, is definitely on the weaker side of the DLC characters that we've had. The only one I would say that is worse than Terry on release would be Aki. I think Aki was worse than Terry is right now upon her release. But I also think he suffers from kind of irrelevancy. If he's not extremely strong, why would you not just pick Ken or Akuma? Why would you not just pick another character that has similar tools and is much simpler and much more effective in their game plan? So it'll be interesting to see where they go with this. I do think Terry marks the end of the DLC power creep. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, especially considering this is such a landmark character. This is the first KOF crossover character in a season where they have another crossover character in Mai approaching, right? You would almost assume that they would purposely make Terry as juiced as possible, because this is a historic moment in the Street Fighter franchise. The first time we have a guest character from a completely different company in the game, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what direction they go with Elena and Mai, if they are trying to rein in the power creep a little bit at this point, because I realize it might have went a little bit too far with characters like Akuma and M. Bison. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. And that's all I have for this video. Let me know what you think about the DLC power creep in Street Fighter 6. Does it exist? Am I making this all up? Is the community delusional? And what do you think about Terry and his current strength and viability in the game? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.